welcome back to my channel. Today we have special guest. Today we have Charles Hoskinson from Cardano. Oh my gosh, thanks so much for coming today.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so this is no joke, but I started my channel 5 months ago, and then at the time, my one of my goal is to have you on on my show, because I'm really big fan of you and Cardano in general, and so I'm so grateful that I could have this opportunity. So today, the purpose is basically because you guys are listed in Japan, and there's just so many people want to know about you as a person and about Cardano, the vision, what's coming in the future. So we want to cover that. But maybe there's so many people who's watching for the first time and who might not know much about you. So maybe could you briefly kind of explain who you are, what you do?
Yeah. I'm not too interesting. I've just been in the space so long that I guess I've accumulated a little bit of a resume. So I've been in the cryptocurrency space for about 10 years. Originally, I started as a trader and a miner, and I wasn't doing anything too interesting. And then in
Oh,
2013, I professionally entered the space as an engineer. So I actually started building cryptocurrency protocols, and I've worked on a lot of different projects. And the really breakthrough projects were Ethereum and BitShares. And then that gave me the opportunity to start my own company, and that's Input Output. And we've been running since 2015, and we've grown from 2 people to about 500 people in 52 countries. And the product we're most known for is Cardano.
right.
We designed that protocol from the scratch. We wrote over 111 research papers, about 1 million lines of code,
Wow.
and now it's in the top 5 in the cryptocurrencies, and we have one of the largest communities in the world. What makes Cardano so special, though, to Japan was that actually that's where it was founded. I was living in Osaka when we got Cardano started. I was in Namba, just
Really?
right outside of it, and yeah, I'd go and get ramen at 4 o'clock in the morning while we were designing certain things. And so it's the first 2 years of the project were very Japan focused, and then it
Wow.
launched in 2017, and
Mm.
then it became a global cryptocurrency, and it's been a lot of fun.
I had no idea. Wow. So, what was the reason why you started in Japan and reason why you were in Osaka at the time?
Well, it was quite by accident. So my co-founder lived in Japan. He was actually in Shinkano, right in outside of Osaka. You take the Mitsubishi line and Shinkanaoka, I think is where he was at. And he was teaching English, and so we co-founded the company together. And he said, "Hey, there's some investors in Japan that'd be quite interested in doing something like Ethereum, but Asia focused." And I said, "Well, that sounds interesting. Let's go talk to them." And that's what really got things bootstrapped, and it kind of evolved and iterated as a project, and it turned into the Cardano we know and love today, which is a general purpose cryptocurrency to compete with Ethereum and
Hmm.
Tezos and EOS and Polkadot and the rest of the gang. We call it kind of the third generation cryptocurrencies that are doing really cool and interesting things. But Japan was a lovely place to run a startup, especially one that involved hardcore engineering and a lot of science. And we built a lot of wonderful relationships along the way. Like we still have a research lab at Tokyo Institute of Technology, and
Hmm.
our one of our fellows, Mario Larangera, is both teaching and doing research there. And we have a lot of great partners in Japan, like DC Spark, and Emerco does some stuff there and so
Hmm.
forth. And so our heart is always in Japan at some point.
Wow, I didn't know that story. That was beautiful. I always wanted to ask you about this question, but I recognize a lot of like Japanese essence in your background in your video. For example, like a Japanese samurai armor. Also, that's a Totoro.
Yeah, that's real armor, by the way. It was made by an armor smith in Tokyo. It's not a prop; it's wearable, and
Oh
the
wow.
family that's been making that armor has been making it for 400 years.
Oh wow. So you kind of become familiar with Japanese culture when you started the company back then.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Definitely.
mean, if you wanted to do something in Asia with cryptocurrencies, there were really 3 options. There was South Korea, China, and Japan.
Mm-mm.
And I grew up in Hawaii, and so all our neighbors were Japanese when I was growing up on the island of Maui. And so
Oh
when I
wow.
was a kid, I did judo and everything. So I was always closer to Japanese culture than Korean. And I kind of looked at China and I said, they're probably going to close down the industry at some point because
Hmm.
these are such open systems, and that's just not the Chinese way.
Yeah.
So it made sense to choose Japan as kind of a good project place, and we operated there for quite some time, and we learned a
Mm.
lot. along the way. And so, and what was also so nice is, the Japanese people are very patient. And the whole point of Cardano was to say, hey, we're going to do all this foundational scientific research and formal methods, and it's not going to be available in 6 months. It's going to take many years to build this thing out. And we've been working on the project for 6 years, and we're just now starting to get to the really good parts and starting to build up. But a lot of the reasons why Cardano was so successful was because of that patience that we got from the early days of the Japanese participation.
Wow. Definitely, I want to get into what the Cardano is, but also I kind of want to get into this conversation with about you, as you mentioned that. Well, first of all, like it is so rare to see someone like you who have achieved a lot in early. Well, you're still like early in 30s, right? So I wanted to kind of ask you about like what was your childhood look like? Like you mentioned you grew up in Hawaii, but I believe I know that you developed this passion for math and engineering and all that things along the way. So maybe could you maybe tell us your story of like life, how you grew up, what you were interested in when you were younger?
I kind of had an odd childhood. So I grew up in Hawaii on the island of Maui, and I was homeschooled. The school system in Hawaii is not very good, and so my mother said, "All right, well, I'll homeschool you in the early grades." But I just stayed through all the way, and so I ended up graduating at 15 because I worked through the summers when I was in high school, and so I graduated quite early, and it gave me a big head start on a lot of things. But also, I had 2 doses of brain, but half a dose of personality. I graduated very early. I was always the youngest guy in the room, but I'd never really gone to a public high school. I was always homeschooled, and so it was very difficult for me to make that kind of transition. And mathematics was nice because it was one of those fields where you didn't have to talk to people and you didn't have to socialize with people or relate with people. So if you were introverted, it was just a great field to be in. And the other thing about mathematics that was so beautiful was that it was kind of the universal language of all the sciences. So I had a hard time of deciding, what would I want to do? Do I do medicine and biology, or do I do physics, or do I do chemistry, or do I do computer science? And I said, well, if I study mathematics, the rigor in the problem solving skills that you have there, no matter what you want to do, business or computer science or what have you, you can do that. You'll have a common language there. Okay? Mathematics kind of teaches you how to think. It teaches you how to approach a problem, how to look for a solution, how to break a problem down to simpler problems or analogous problems. And it also teaches you to enjoy spending long time working on something. People get bored pretty easily. They give up pretty easily. Mathematicians can spend days, weeks, months thinking about the same thing. And so that discipline and rigor is a very valuable skill set that you can carry with you and take to whatever problem domain that you're in. Now, my father's a doctor, and my grandfather was a doctor. My brother's a doctor. So I always imagined that I would do math for a little bit, and then at some point I'd go become a physician. But I really don't like people very much. So that didn't work out so well for me. I just kept doing mathematics, and I got lost in the academic weeds. And I was going to get a PhD in math, but I never completed one. And so I said, I'll take a break and I'll eventually go back and finish that. But then I got bit by the entrepreneur bug, and I started getting swept into the cryptocurrency space. And then I've been here now for so long that I think that's my career now.
Wow. Yeah, obviously, well, this mathematic, like a rigorous patience, definitely paid out for sure. But so how did you kind of start? Well, how did you like specifically get into the crypto? Like you told me that you are the trader, right? That's the first encounter.
Yeah. So I would always read a lot of open source. So I was really interested in things like Austrian economics because I worked on the Ron Paul campaign back in 2007. I was a volunteer, and so I'd learned a lot about sound money and gold-backed money. So I already had kind of an economic inclination for deflationary monetary policy, and I'd followed things like the Liberty Dollar and the Ron Paul dollar and these things, and so I kind of lived in that group. But then also I belonged to a lot of message boards like the Peer-to-Peer Foundation, and I participated in a few open source projects. So I knew a lot about open source software and these things. And so Bitcoin just came out, and I think it was Slashdot or something like that, where I saw something on it. And I said, oh, this Bitcoin thing looks interesting. And I downloaded the white paper, and this was very early days, like 2011. So Bitcoin was
Wow.
very cheap back then. And so it was hard to buy. Usually you'd buy it on a forum, and then you'd send PayPal transaction to somebody, and then they would send you Bitcoin. And it was all trust based because, they're like $1 a coin, they're worthless. So you could get a lot of them. And then I set up a mining rig, and I had a AMD 5850s in Crossfire. I had 4 of them running at 1.2 gigahashes, and you could actually get a decent profit there. So I accumulated about 50,000 Bitcoin, and at the time it was worth probably actually quite a bit. It was $200,000 or something like that. So I was so happy about that. So I started buying things, paying off some debts. I gave them to people, these types of things, and I ended up giving away or trading or selling most of it. So I didn't keep it, but I learned a lot along the way. And then I kind of left the space for a bit in 2012, and then in 2013, it got really big, and so I said I should make this my full-time job, and I got in through education. So I started teaching classes on Bitcoin through something called the Bitcoin Education Project.
Oh, wow.
And we ended up having over 70,000 students. That's how I got a chance to kind of meet everybody.
Wow. So you got into also teaching, and then and after that you joined this you co-founded Ethereum. I see. And then
And they didn't like me too much, so I was only there for 6 months.
oh no. Oh no, like you. Well, I'm curious about those story, but so I mean, you have this.
And it's water over the dam,
Yeah.
a lot of people are curious, but it's funny. I spent 6 years running this company and only 6 months at Ethereum, but everybody wants to talk about Ethereum.
Yeah.
Whenever you start a project, there's, especially one that had that many founders, there was 8 founders with Ethereum. It's too many people.
Right.
Too many
There's so many
directions.
ideas just conflicting each other.
Yeah.
Right.
And so at some point it has to consolidate, and it was either going to be a for-profit like Ripple or a not-for-profit. And Vitalik made that decision, and and 7 of the 8 founders are no longer there. Only Vitalik remains on Ethereum. So it's his project, it's his vision, and he's done a phenomenal job with it. And they've built a great community and a great cryptocurrency. I just happen to disagree about business philosophy and technical philosophy, and you see those disagreements in Cardano. We are following a very different path.
I see. So maybe could you touch on so after the Ethereum, maybe what was your vision, and then how you really wanted to bring this idea of Cardano to the real life, what you wanted to achieve?
So when you look at where Cardano sits, it's easiest to understand in terms of generations of cryptocurrencies. So the first generation was Bitcoin that came out in 2009. And what problem was Bitcoin trying to solve? It was trying to solve the problem of decentralized money. So we had plenty of digital currencies before, like DigiCash or tokens on PayPal or these types of things. That's not hard to do, but usually there's a trusted third party. So some corporation or government basically is responsible for maintaining a ledger. So what Bitcoin did is it figured out how to do that, but without a central entity. And it wasn't clear if that actually had any real value or if the market cared. Bitcoin was worthless in 2009, and then it was worth a lot by 2013. So by 2013, people said, okay, this idea has merit. The problem with Bitcoin is, and still has this issue, you can't do much with it. You can only push value to people. You can only send Bitcoin to people. You can't issue tokens. You can't do smart contracts. You can't do anything. So the easiest way of understanding it is it's like the early days of the internet. When you had the web browser, the only thing you could do with the web browser originally was just look at static pages. So you could have very pretty websites, but they were non-interactive websites. And then suddenly JavaScript came, and then you could program a website, and then you get Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and all these great experiences, or this video conferencing or things like that, right? So that's effectively what we did with Ethereum, is that we brought a programming language to a blockchain, and we introduced the concept of smart contract. And then you went from just being able to push Bitcoin around to a system where you can do an ICO and issue your own token, or put securities on the blockchain, or create dApps and DeFi and these types of things. But the problem with that model is it's still constrained by the same limitations that Bitcoin has in terms of design. So it doesn't scale. It's not interoperable with the outside world. And also there's not a lot of sustainability in either how it does the work or in the governance components of it, of how does it upgrade itself and pay for its development. So to me, I felt like if Ethereum was going to be successful, they would really get people excited about smart contracts, and that would take a few years. But nobody was really worrying too much about scalability and interoperability and sustainability back in 2015. So I thought this was a great research opportunity where we could go and spend a few years doing R&D and engineering. And while Ethereum was proving out the smart contract model and creating network effect for that and validating it, it would give us the time we needed to figure out how to build a better version of it and effectively kind of leapfrog and beat them at Ethereum too. And that's effectively what happened. You know, we were first to market with a provably secure proof of stake. Ethereum is still rolling it out. We're just about to roll out our smart contracts here next month, and that's been a long time coming. We have a lot of great scalability technology that's coming online that is going to match or exceed what Ethereum is doing for Ethereum 2. And that's just because we had the luxury of time to build all these things out and do it right. The other big differentiator was that I felt these protocols have to be built with what are called formal methods. So this is an engineering technique that, for example, the braking software on the Shinkansen, or if you fly on an airplane, how the engine software works, or the flight control systems, they're made in a very special way that they have to work right the first time, every time. Because if they don't, then the train doesn't brake or the aircraft falls out of the sky.
Right.
So there are tools and techniques to write software this way, and they're very expensive and time consuming. And we applied those tools and techniques to the design of Cardano, to the implementation of Cardano, because we said this is going to be infrastructure that people are going to be using for decades, and they're going to be trusting it with billions of dollars. It would be irresponsible to build it in a very shoddy way. You need to build it in a very correct way. So that also added more time, and we paid all of that cost up front, but now we're starting to see the value and benefit of it. Cardano's really become something quite special.
I see. So from my understanding, so it is designed to scale and being used by like millions of people. So in your mind, it's going to be used by like basically like every country that supports basically all humanity.
It's a global scale system, and the market that we really focused on and continue to focus on is the developing world. So we usually say things like economic identity, banking the unbanked. So we have offices in Africa and Ethiopia and other places, and we've closed deals. For example, we just closed a deal this year in Ethiopia for 5 million people. And that'll probably grow to tens of millions in the next 24 months. And we continue to do digital transformation. And what's nice about this is it's more than just a financial system, it's an identity system. So we have the ability to know who people are for the first time ever in Africa, and then they can have credit scores and wallets and the ability to move value and do global online business and so forth. And that's really the space that Cardano operates in. You can use it anywhere. You can use it in Japan. You can use it elsewhere. But where it shines is definitely what we plan to do in Africa and the developing world, Southeast Asia. And collectively, this is about 3 billion people. And there's a lot of value there. There's about $10 trillion of locked up wealth in these economies. And it's illiquid because there's no financial system for it.
Right.
So those can be small businesses that are very wealthy, but they have no ability to securitize or get venture capital. That could be natural resources that are locked up. That could be labor value that's underpaid or underutilized. And the minute that you have a global system, you bring those people into the global economy, and then you've brought $10 trillion into the global economy. And that's really what Cardano is seeking to do. And we have a pretty big lead there. We're one of the fastest growing blockchains in Africa, and we have I'd say the best political access of any of the major projects.
Definitely. So I wanted to kind of ask you, like, how you developed this, like vision for like Africa. Like, did you travel there when you were younger, or like, what was the starting point?
Well, I did, but I think the thing that really changed my view of everything is I read a biography about a guy named Norman Borlaug. And Norman was a scientist, and he studied fertilizer, and he studied agricultural techniques. And so what he did is he spent his life going around the world teaching people how to grow crops properly. And over the course of his life, they estimate that he saved about 1 billion people's lives. Not 1 million, 1 billion people's lives.
Wow.
Because most of those people would have starved to death without the techniques that he taught them. So one person saved 1 billion. So it showed me this great asymmetry that knowledge and systems and technology can provide, where a small group of people who are highly motivated with the right ideas if you can get those into the hands of as many people as possible, can change the lives of a lot of people. And so when we started thinking about Cardano, I did a TED talk in Bermuda back in 2014. I kind of laid it out. I said the world lives in two systems, a developed system and a developing system. And if we're really clever about how we build this technology, we can completely replace the systems that the developing world use. And then suddenly everything changes. Instead of paying loans at 35% interest or 85% interest, remittances at $1.20 for every dollar you want to move. You now have those look like what they look like in Japan or in America or in Canada and so forth. And if you have the opportunity to do something like that, that's as good of a career as anything else. You can either sell blockchain solutions in New York City or you can sell them in Rwanda. And the difference is probably not money. You'll probably make just as much money if you're clever about how you build those systems in Rwanda, if not more so. The difference is you're helping people who live on $1 a day versus making someone who lives on $1 million richer. And I'd much rather spend my life working with people who have nothing and rising them up and getting them integrated in the global economy. And also, if you want to change your home, you're never going to do that by asking permission for change. Like we just ran into this problem in the United States with the infrastructure bill, where 75 out of 100 senators agreed that the bill needed to be changed to protect our industry. And the political process prevented that from happening. And there's a very good possibility the infrastructure bill is going to pass with very damaging regulatory language that everybody agrees shouldn't be in there. But for some reason it is, and we just can't change it. Well, I don't run into that in Africa. If we need laws changed, they get changed. The governments are run by very young people who are ambitious and excited. And they just want what's best for their country and people. Their time has come. So it's in a situation where when you look to where we're going from 2020 to 2050, I very firmly believe that Africa is going to experience the fastest growth and the most opportunity for entrepreneurship and new systems and new models. If that's the case, and I've bet right, America will change its laws to match the African laws because it wants business and money. So that's how you change the system, So America, we created the internet. That model of the internet, the world adopted because that's where all the money and value was. And similarly, if we have a big movement in Africa and Southeast Asia and South America and the Caribbean, and that collectively has trillions of dollars of value, the rest of the world will adopt that to compete with it and be part of that. So I think that's the best way of changing my own country and getting e-voting and digital identity and sound and fair money and so forth. Not asking them for permission, but creating an economic reality where they must change. And if they don't, the country falls into a depression.
In a way that those African or maybe Asian countries will lead America as basically become example, so that America has to change. Very interesting.
Yeah, and it's not as crazy as it sounds, because look at the rise of China. Back in the 1970s, Venezuela was a wealthier country than China. and if you were a venture capitalist or an entrepreneur saying, I'm going to go invest some money in China and build a business there, everybody would think you're insane.
Yeah.
And now it's, a dominant economy. So very quickly, things can change. The same for Japan. After World War II, Japan was decimated. And within 20 years, it was a superpower again.
Right.
So, things can change very, very quickly if they have the right systems, the right mentality, the right people. And if you look at the African demographics right now, they're starting to get Western educated. They have access to the internet. They're taking courses on Harvard for free and MIT for free and watching YouTube videos just like we do. And everybody's very young. 70% of the population of Ethiopia is at or under the age of 30.
Oh, wow.
And so that's an incredibly young population. And so if you're making a bet, who is going to have the highest growth and the best ideas, young people who are well educated, who are internet enabled, who have a desire for change, those are the ones who are going to have a very good shot. They just need the right system and the right tools. And that's the point of the cryptocurrency space.
I see. Wow. Definitely. Well, yeah. I think this morning I saw the news about I think you mentioned in the Bloomberg talking about this, change in Ethiopia. And maybe could you touch on, a little bit in a details as to what you're trying to do? My understanding is you provide the digital identity for the students, for 5 million students? And then what's your like a master plan after that?
The national ID system at some point. So the government is redoing their entire identity system. The prime minister is a cryptographer, so he's one of the few people around that can read our papers. And Abiy, he wrote a document called Digital Ethiopia 2025, which is his vision for how he wants to transform Ethiopia for the fourth industrial revolution. And part of his plan is to get a digital identity into the hands of every person in the country. Because the minute you have digital identity, then you can start building credit scores, you can start doing lending, you have much lower cost payment systems and so forth. So what he's doing is he's allowing companies to build identity systems for different parts, like the education sector and so forth. And they're kind of opening up that process that at some point a vendor will be selected to do the ID system for the entire country. So we think we have a very competitive chance to be able to do digital identity for all 110 million people in Ethiopia within the next 24 to 36 months. And we'll be competing against others like Microsoft and so forth. Well, that's fun. But we've at least gotten 5 million so far. And what's nice is those identities will follow the students throughout their entire academic life and beyond. So right now it's K through 12 students, but it can go to university, and then after university become a generic ID that they use for business and work and for their personal life. Now, the relationship between the identity system and Cardano is the identity system runs on top of Cardano. So Cardano is the infrastructure that enables this, and that is then interoperable with assets that are issued. So if you're a Japanese entrepreneur, for example, after smart contracts launch, you can build financial applications that interface with that identity system and suddenly work with people in Ethiopia. So that's one of the magical things about these deals is we're bringing people who have never been in the cryptocurrency space into the space with an identity system that then allows them to go through compliance and get reputation. And that means then you can build financial products and services for people in these jurisdictions. And some of those products are already being built. Like in Kenya, for example, we're exploring a peer-to-peer lending program. And it's only $150,000 to start because it's a pilot, but very quickly it'll grow into the millions. And it has great returns, but actually it has a big benefit over the legacy systems. The legacy systems are about 35 to 85% interest, and these systems will be about 3% per month for short-term loans. So they're carried about 2-3 months at a time, and they're usually for agricultural loans. So they need to buy a few things, and they can repay within 2 to 3 months.
Wow. So okay, so not only Ethiopia, but there's a lot of African countries like Kenya, maybe probably Nigeria too, right?
Yeah, I'm just about to do Africa tour in October, and we'll be South Africa, Tanzania, Rwanda, Ghana, Burundi, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Kenya. So yeah, so it's all of them have an overwhelming demand, and every country is very different. Ethiopia is a very different country than Nigeria and Kenya in business culture, etiquette, and development. The same for Ghana versus Rwanda versus South Africa. But there's a universal demand for Pan-African solutions, Pan-African compliance, Pan-African currencies, so things across the entire continent. And what we're doing is we're laying the infrastructure through partners like World Mobile for connectivity, through Prism, their identity system for getting digital identity to people, and then with Cardano for financial services. And then once that's there, entrepreneurs have access to those markets on both sides. African entrepreneurs can globalize and now do business with people in Japan and America, and Japanese and American entrepreneurs can do business with people in Africa. So these are new economic opportunities that the infrastructure provides.
Wow. Okay. That's that's yeah. They're just beyond imagination. But like in terms of the digital identity, like once you provide the identity, can they bring the identity to also use like banking or like other like a traditional financial system as well,
so we're
right?
using something called the DID standard, the digital identifier. And the great part about DID is that it's a W3C standard, the same body that standardizes HTML and CSS and all these other languages. So it's an open standard. It's patent free. More than 50 companies use it, including Microsoft and IBM, and we use it as well. And it's a blockchain agnostic and infrastructure agnostic. So you can use DIDs on Bitcoin, you can use DIDs on Ethereum, you can use DIDs on Cardano, and also you can use DIDs in legacy infrastructure, like for banking identity, banking compliance exchanges, and so forth. So our belief is over the next 5 to 10 years, this will become the dominant ID standard for all identifiers, whether it be government issued IDs or banking IDs and so forth.
Wow.
And so what's beautiful is once somebody has access to that infrastructure, it's interoperable. So when we bring them into Cardano, then they're actually now brought into the world ID system effectively by that. And so that means they can move without permission from one system to another system and carry with them their reputation, their credentials, the certifications, and so forth. And you get a beautiful economy of scale with DID-based systems, KYC, so that's know your customer, which every bank has to do if they're going to do business with somebody. It could cost as little as 10 cents per person.
Oh.
So the cost to identify an entire country like Ethiopia, document permitting, could be $10 million for all 100 million people that you would identify. So it's a amazing order of magnitude. It used to be many dollars per person, like $5, $10. So you see orders of magnitude reduction with these tools and technology. The other thing is DIDs are user generated. So instead of me creating a DID and giving it to you, you generate it yourself. And you can have multiple DIDs that are contextual to business domains. So you can have a DID for government authentication, but then a DID for World of Warcraft and your logon. And then you could have a DID for your banking software, and then maybe a DID for your online presence and so forth, an alias there. And you can maintain all of those credentials and create all of those at your discretion and have different reputations and levels of anonymity with these types of things. So the government will probably be your actual name tied to your passport, but maybe your gaming identity is an alias and nobody knows who you are, or these types of things. So you can do all of that with the same technology.
Wow. I can imagine. So I have like a friends in like Kenya. So he wanted to like study in US, but he couldn't provide the school, how to say it?
The academic credential,
credential, and he got into travel, and actually he quit because of that. And I was just thinking, there's so many like smart people like in Africa also just freely can come to like US or everywhere.
Yeah, and also it helps you build reputation in comparison, because even if you have the credential, what does the credential actually mean? I mean, if you see somebody says they have a bachelor's degree in mathematics at Tokyo Institute of Technology, it's okay, I know Tokyo Tech. It's a very good school. It's the MIT of Japan. That means something. You're going to get a good job. Toyota will call you. Other people will call you. But then what is a bachelor's degree at a university in Nairobi, in Kenya mean? The problem as an employer is I actually don't know if that's a real university, the level of credibility it has, where it ranks relative to Tokyo Tech and Harvard and MIT or a state school like CU Boulder. And so this is the great part about digitizing these credentials, is it's not just about verifiability and unforgeability, so you can't counterfeit them, but it's also about reputation and credibility. Because once you have everybody in the system, you can start looking at macro trends and say, hey, by the way, the majority of candidates that are coming from these universities tend to be very strong in this area. So it gives you some notion beyond just reputation that the university is doing something right or wrong. And that's super important for outsourcing. It's super important for employment, also for research and these types of things. We do a lot of research at IO Global, and we write a lot of papers. And if you look at our paper library, it's over 110. There's over 10,000 citations there. And these papers have appeared at major conferences. And so normal academics would say, okay, that's very solid. But, what if we wanted to have a different way of weighting academic output? Because let's say you're a researcher in South Africa or a researcher in Nigeria, and you're a brilliant person. If you can't get access to the right journals and to the right conferences because maybe you can't travel, that means you're not considered to be a strong academic. So there needs to be a different way to publish. There needs to be a different way to build reputation systems around the work outputs you do, whether that be academic work or that be economic work, that be work that you do for commercial gigs and so forth. And the point of the PRISM system that we use with Cardano, these DIDs, is that it creates a low-cost foundation for all of those things. And whether you're using it as a voting credential or you're using it as an age verification tool or citizenship or criminal background check, or you're using it as a way of understanding someone's reputation and certifications and capabilities, one system can do all of those things, and that's portable to all systems. It's not locked in.
So From the from this ID perspective, I think I can see like huge impact on it for sure. And then what's your view on like how easy it is for Africa to adopt like a blockchain based like a for example financial system? 'Cause I heard the
Sure.
rumor that because there's just so many corruption, right? Like the cash just back and forth, and like people put cash in the pocket, like a backdoor deal, whatever, and then there's just so huge resistance from those like a party as well. So I thought like it may not be like a really easy task to do so. What's your view on this?
Yeah, yeah. So it's important to understand that you can only change at the rate of the change that the people are willing to change with. And so in Africa, there's a big transition from the old to the young.
Mm,
A lot of the leaders are in their 70s and 80s, and they're being replaced with leaders in their 30s and 40s and 50s. And
mm,
these ones have grown up with internet and computers, and they
mm,
want to digitize it. The other
mm,
thing is, a lot of these kids have had to live with the corruption their whole life, and they're sick of
mm.
it. you
Oh,
know
mm,
and so they want to change the system, and the problem is you can't rely on virtue. You have to rely on systems to get rid of corruption.
mm,
And I have
mm,
a very good example of this. So I'm friends with the former finance minister of the country of Georgia. It's an Eastern European country, and they gave him the worst job in the country. They said, you need to go clean up the police force. And that's like the job that nobody wants, because the police will just shoot you. And they were one of the most corrupt police in all of Eastern Europe.
Wow.
In
Okay.
fact, it was so bad that when you flew into Tbilisi, they'd give you a bribe sheet. So it's like a sheet telling you how much you should expect to pay in bribes for various government services. Or
What? Really?
I know they give Western businessmen a bribe sheet. This is something the government actually issued. This is how corrupt it was. They were just resigned to corruption. So he thought about
Wow.
it for a while, and he said, okay, well, my problem is if I put a virtuous cop in
Mm-hmm.
with these corrupt police officers, he has to become corrupt, because if he doesn't become corrupt, they'll kill him. So you can't reform that group of bad apples. You just simply have to clear them all out. So what he
Mm-hmm.
did is he had got a bunch of police officers, candidates, to travel to America and trained in an entire parallel police force in America for 6 months. When
Oh.
they were done, sent them back and fired every police officer in the entire country and replaced them with a new set of police officers. Then
Mm.
he banned the carrying of cash. He said the police officers are not allowed to carry cash. And he had a
Oh.
second group of police officers randomly pull over the police and search them. And if they had cash, he'd fire them on the spot.
Oh wow.
So they, by doing that, went from one of the most corrupt police forces in Europe to
Mm.
one of the least corrupt police forces in just a 5-year period. It was a remarkable
Oh.
transition. Now they still have some issues here and there, but
Mm-hmm.
it was a dramatic change, and that was a systems level change. So
Mm-hmm.
when you look at a lot of these young African nations that are globalizing, there's a huge appetite to change the way that business works and the systems, so that people can't be corrupt. They're
Mm.
self-auditing and self-certifying. There's a balance there.
Mm.
And to these entrenched interests, they make a calculation. They say, well, yes, we can be corrupt. And would you rather be corrupt in a poor nation, or would you rather be a wealthy businessman in a rich nation?
Mm.
They actually usually can make more money when the country gets richer, because they happen to own a lot of the businesses and infrastructures and these things,
Mm.
than they could just by robbing the poor on a daily basis. And every time it's been tried, it's consistently worked in every place it's been tried. But there's no silver bullet for it. It's hard work. You have setbacks. We've lost bids where there was clearly bribery and corruption on the other side. I mean, there was one thing that we wanted to do in a certain country that shall remain nameless, where it was a deal that we thought would cost us about $500,000 to deliver. I really wanted the deal, so I bid $100,000, and I said, I'll do it as charity. And
Mm.
then someone underbid us and bid $20,000 to service 1.2 million people. There was no way the math could work. So we said,
Mm.
okay, that's corruption, because as soon as they get awarded, they're going to renegotiate and get $2-3 million from the deal or something like that, and
Mm.
they're going to hire someone's uncle and brother. So we do see that. We do
Mm.
see that a lot, and so you have to understand that the time horizons of these deals are usually about
Mm.
3 years to 7 years.
Three
So
seven.
the Ethiopia deal, for example, we started negotiating that in 2018. We closed it this
Oh.
year.
Okay. So 3 years.
So
Mm.
yeah, so it takes quite a bit of time to be able
Wow.
to negotiate and close these things. But on the other hand, when
Mm.
you do it, you get 5 million users, 10 million users, and so that's a lot of people. And if you
True.
look at a 5, 10, 15-year horizon, when you start
Mm-hmm.
adding it up, you start
Mm.
looking at hundreds of millions of people that
Right.
you eventually get. And those people then eventually will create liquidity for billions to trillions of dollars of assets
Mm-hmm.
that enter the global marketplace. So you have to be very patient.
Mm.
And the American entrepreneurs were not very patient. We're very fast. It has to be done now. What's the next
Yeah.
startup? But these are systems for governance and for how human beings live. And historically,
Mm.
those systems evolve in decades and centuries. They don't
Mm-hmm.
evolve in weeks and months.
Mm. I see. Wow. But like, but 3 years does seem like a long time, but 3 years to reach 5 million people isn't that doesn't sound bad. So
Yeah,
hopefully other countries are gonna follow move probably quickly, um, so that we can see the big change. But I kind of also wanted to ask you about this Africa, but also you touch on you sometimes talk about El Salvador, and you mentioned about you might fly to El Salvador to have a meeting or something. I don't know. Like, do you have any like
yeah.
visions, or is it something that you want to do maybe in that country?
Yeah, yeah, we definitely did consider El Salvador as a jurisdiction, and we're just gonna we'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
There's the deal's coming out on the 7th. September 7th, the law is coming into effect, and
Yeah.
we'll see what happens with that with El Salvador. It's one of those countries where it's very exciting that they've passed a law and they've made Bitcoin legal tender,
Mm.
but there are a lot of nuances to that make it more difficult than it would with a country, let's say, than Japan or in or United States or Canada.
Oh.
And so whenever you see a jurisdiction like that, you have to be very careful with the details and the checks and balances and these types of things. However, it
Mm.
did create a trend throughout all of Central America and Latin America and South America, where
Mm-hmm.
now we're seeing pro-Bitcoin laws being passed in Uruguay and
Right.
Paraguay,
Yeah.
and also the other Northern Triangle countries, Honduras
Mm.
and Guatemala. And so I do believe that ultimately it's going to have a long-term positive impact for the adoption of cryptocurrencies.
Mm.
But I don't necessarily know if El Salvador is going to be the ideal bulwark of the embracing of crypto.
Mm.
And so it's probably going to be in a smaller nation like, let's say, Bermuda or something like that, where they can move even faster, and also
Mm.
they don't have a lot of the legacy problems that El Salvador does. I mean, if you look at the
Mm.
population dynamics, there's 8 million El Salvadorans, 6 million live in the country, about 2 million live in the United States.
Yeah.
The GDP is $26 billion, and $6 billion of that is from remittances from the United States into El Salvador. So it's a kind of under pseudo U.S. jurisdiction in that
Mm-hmm.
respect. And there's a lot of issues with gangs like MS-13,
Mm.
and it's mostly a cash economy. Over 70% of the economy is unbanked.
Mm.
So there's a lot of nuances and details. Now contrast that with Bermuda, 71,000 people. The poverty rate is only 11%. Everybody has
Oh.
internet. Most
Mm.
people are Western educated, and they have a very evolved fintech sector. 85% of the GDP comes from
Mm-hmm.
financial technologies. They're
Oh.
on, and they're on many. Their GDP is about $6 billion, and
Mm-hmm.
they have, about a billion in tax revenue, a billion in expenditures. Their debt is only 40% of GDP, and they run usually no deficits.
Mm.
So Bermuda is, an example of a country that would get me a little bit more excited, because there, if you create a system, that's a
Mm.
backdoor into the U.S. economy and to the U.K.
Mm.
It's a bridge in both cases.
Mm-mm.
And it's a great model for how cryptocurrency could be adopted throughout the entire Caribbean and then work its way into many other places. But
Mm.
you don't have to worry about shadow banks or criminal elements or banking 70% of the unbanked or things like that. So I think that's a better country for the adoption of digital currencies if a nation state is considering that.
Mm-mm.
That said, our mission is to bank the unbanked.
Mm-hmm.
We as a company care a lot about this. So we think just through decentralized spreading of the software that can be accomplished in places like El Salvador and Honduras. No one has to ask permission to download a Cardano wallet or a Bitcoin wallet. You do that yourself.
Mm.
And we see a lot of organic adoption. We have millions of people floating around our ecosystem from Japan to South Africa. So the same can occur in El Salvador and other places. The U.S. government is curious about that too.
Like I thought this, like, there's an argument in Japan, like, well, because BTC is now foreign currency technically, so then um, some people argue that, well, it should really be a foreign currency, no, like a cryptocurrency. But I guess U.S. doesn't really consider that as like well, the foreign currency, right?
Yeah, so countries sign treaties. Japan and the U.S. have both signed treaties that agree to honor reciprocal currencies. And so El Salvador, by saying Bitcoin is legal tender, a strict interpretation of some of these treaties would mean that Bitcoin is now going to be considered a foreign currency under U.S. law or under Japanese law. But there are more nuances there.
Yeah.
Japan is a sovereign country. The U.S. is a sovereign country. And ultimately, your Ministry of Finance and our Department of Treasury make the decisions of whether they're going to honor it or not. The other thing is El Salvador actually has two currencies. It uses the US dollar and Bitcoin.
True.
And there's convertibility there. So whenever there's a dual currency system, the historical precedent is the governments will decide which one of the two they're going to honor. And because the unit of account is not set in Bitcoin, but it's set in US dollar, the U.S. government's position is to honor the U.S. dollar as the legal tender of El Salvador, and I think Japan is probably going to follow the same same path. Yeah. That said, Japan has differed from the United States in regulation of cryptocurrencies. The FSA had created a very comprehensive framework, and it's a tough one.
Right.
But there is a comprehensive regulatory framework and asset clarity. For example, what's happening to Ripple in the United States would never happen to Ripple in Japan. The FSA is quite comfortable with Ripple, and Ripple has great partners like SBI and so forth. Whereas in the United States, they're considered to be a security and they're being attacked and so forth. So I think Japan is actually ahead of the curve in certain respects on crypto regulation compared to the U.S.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting though. So I kind of wanted to kind of switch back to the topic to more like a Cardano, and so you talked about smart contract is coming, and then there's so many people who's watching as like a regular non-tech investors. So like what does it mean for the regular investors, and what kind of like exciting things gonna come after this smart contract?
So let's talk about transaction. That's kind of the unit of change for all cryptocurrencies. So a transaction has 5 parts to it. And these are universal, whether you're with, JP Morgan Chase Bank or Bank of America, or you're dealing with Bitcoin or Cardano or Ethereum. Yeah. So first there's what are you sending? That's the value that's on the rail. And that could be a lot of different things. It could be a currency like the dollar. It could be a commodity like gold. It could be a stock. It can be a bond. It can be a cryptocurrency. It could be an NFT. It can be all kinds of crazy stuff. Where value is an abstract thing. So first, the first question you ask is, does your system have the ability to represent value abstractly? So Bitcoin does not. There's only one instrument of value that you can send transactions, and that's Bitcoin. Ethereum does through the ERC20 standard and these other standards, but it's kind of kludgy. Cardano does natively with the native asset. Second, it's about the identity of the actors involved. So are you going one-to-one? So Charles to you, you to me. Or are you going one to many, many to one, many to many? These types of transactions. So for example, like crowdfunding, lots of people send funds to one place. Many to many is lots of people are transporting to lots of other people, like a stock market or these types of things. Okay, so identity is super important. Okay, then third, it's the metadata component. So what's the story of the transaction? So the story is like, where did it happen? When did it happen? Why did you do it? These types of things. And that's super important. If you withdraw money from an ATM, there's a world of difference between withdrawing money from an ATM and, Namba versus Tobita. So there's these things are not the same, right? Same amount of money, same type of transaction, but different location tells you different intent with with that setup. Okay, and then you have the contract side, and usually that's paper. So why are you sending money? Well, I'm donating. I'm buying something. Here's your receipt. I'm entering a contractual relationship. Like, you're going to fix my roof if I pay you 10,000 yen, something like that. Okay. So that's the contractual side, and that can be paper or automated. So a smart contract is just the automation of that agreement. Okay. And then finally, there's the meta component of regulation. So transactions always occur with people and jurisdictions. And so the regulatory framework that the transaction lives in is dependent on those people and those and jurisdictions. So if, for example, you're a Japanese company and you have someone in the United States access your server, you're actually under U.S. law. And Japan has taken the same position when Japanese citizens were accessing servers in Singapore and Hong Kong to trade cryptocurrencies. They said to those exchanges, hey, you're under Japanese law because you're dealing with Japanese customers and so forth. So those 5 components are always there: the regulatory components, the contract components, the metadata components, the identity components, and the value components. So the question is, what is the best machine to do all of that? And how do you do that in the most cost-effective, efficient way possible and make it as programmable as possible so you as the developer have the most flexibility? And this is what our industry is trying to figure out. In every cryptocurrency, Polkadot and Tezos and Ethereum and Cardano, we have slightly different philosophies on these things. So what we tried to do with Cardano was pick a philosophy that we felt had 3 criteria. One, it's easy to scale. So you can go from a few transactions to many transactions, but your cost stays relatively the same. You don't, as a developer or a business, want to wake up on Tuesday and find out you've doubled your operational expenses.
Yeah.
It doesn't work this way. You walk down the arcade, it's like the McDonald's there in Osaka. Their rent doesn't suddenly become $5,000 on Tuesday, and then it's $1,000 the next day. No business can operate under those terms. So you need predictability and scale of cost. And second, you need to have assurance that the things you think are true are true. So in other words, the software quality is okay. So you see hacks all the time. Like Poly just got hacked 600 million.
Right.
MakerDAO was just hacked. Thorchain was hacked. So people believe these things work, and then they blow up, and then millions to hundreds of millions of dollars get stolen. So as a developer and as a consumer, we need a system where it's very easy for us to determine what is high quality and what is low quality. Okay, just by looking at it, visually looking at that. And how we do that as consumers right now is usually the country of origin. So when it says made in Japan or made in the United States or made in Germany, we say, oh yeah, it's high quality, because those are regulated markets. And you see made in China, you're like, I don't know about that. Okay, maybe, and so we can't do that with financial contracts or software. So we need some other mechanism to certify it and so forth. And then third, I think it's very important to have interoperability, meaning whatever contract you've written, application you've written, you can interface with many different systems and many different sets of customers. Because at the end of the day, if you're a developer, you're not supposed to be loyal to Cardano or to Ethereum or something. Because why would you be? It's like saying, oh, well, I'm writing this amazing web application and cell phone app, but it has to be on Amazon. It can't be on Microsoft. It has to be on Amazon Web Services. It's like, that's nuts.
Right.
You wouldn't think this way. You say, no, that's just infrastructure, and you're renting that infrastructure. And if it's not cost competitive, then you're going to move to different infrastructure. And people do this all the time, So you have to be slightly agnostic and fluid so that you are always living in the best environment for your business objectives. So what we tried to do with Cardano was say, build your app in a certain way, and you'll get predictable costs. You'll get the ability to certify the software and get the assurance levels you need for the value that you have at risk. And also, a lot of the stuff you build can be eventually ported to other systems and get customers from other systems. And then ultimately, it's going to allow you, the developer, to benefit from those things. And then everything else is a particular detail, like, do you want a governance layer, or what type of metadata does your application require? But those are facts and circumstances connected to particular verticals, like oracles and stable coins and dexes, or video games with NFTs, or these types of things. And in each of those categories, we have USPs that we think are pretty appealing and exciting. But I think the core of it, in the general sense, is just understand what you're actually doing. What is a transaction? Why are you doing that transaction? And then, are you doing it with predictability? Are you doing it with reliability? And are you doing it with flexibility? And if you don't have those properties, then I don't think you're going to be successful in your business. And ultimately, as an infrastructure provider, I'm here for you, the developer. I'm here for your business. I'm here to help you build your idea. The meta property is also customer based, like who's in our ecosystem. And so if you want access to African customers, or if you want access to developing world customers for your products, we're making a point to try to bring that population into our ecosystem as concisely as we can, so they can become your customers for your applications that you build.
So it sounds like maybe in the future it's going to be like a cost competition, I guess. Like everything is going to be interoperable, and then that will be real competitive advantage over other.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Even Microsoft servers now run Linux. So if you can write a Linux application and run it
Yeah.
on an Azure, and you
Mm.
can do a cost comparison of Azure versus
Mm.
Amazon Web Services versus Rackspace or
Mm.
DigitalOcean or any of these other things. So it's very commoditized, and
Yeah.
the infrastructure layers will become that way. And the
Mm.
real value is going to come from the additional things that the infrastructure provides you:
Mm.
blockchain services, software quality services, ease of development, software lifecycle,
Mm.
all those standard things that we tend to look at when we're comparing Android versus iOS
Yeah.
versus Microsoft or these types of.
I see. Well, I actually realized we already close to the promised time. We have like 3 minutes left.
Mhm.
So time flies so fast. But just to close the conversation, maybe could you provide closing remarks to Japanese community that they finally, officially buy ADA with full confidence, and maybe just just message to people and community and what's coming this year to the Cardano.
Well, first, I want to invite everybody in Japan to come to the Cardano Summit. We're having it in September. It's towards the
Right.
end of the month. It's probably going to be around the third week of September.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to see everybody there. It's going to be a digital event, and
Mm-hmm.
so there's a physical locations. We'll try to have one in Tokyo. Uh,
Oh.
but then also there's going to be an online, and it's free to come. You don't have to pay anything. So we'd love
Mm-hmm.
for you to come there. We'll talk about the utility of the platform, the adoption, the impact, and the governance of it. And I think you guys are going to have a lot of fun. Second, I'd like to say thank you. The Japanese community was our first community, and they've been with us since 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And because of their patience and commitment, Cardano is where it's at today. This really is the Ethereum of Japan, and our soul is really there. We followed a lot of Japanese principles. It was this like almost like Kodawari. This relentless
Qualify.
pursuit of perfection. And so we were obsessed with let's make it better. Let's keep refining. And it was almost like a way of life. And it's like so
Mm-hmm.
we said, hey, let's write another paper, let's do another thing. And we really accomplished a lot of great things together, and that's because of that place we got started. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
profound thank you there. And third, I'd like to say, hey, we're open for business. Write your application, start building software.
Yeah.
you know, by the time this airs, I think this date will be public, but we're probably going to launch smart contracts September 12th. So we're announcing that tomorrow. So don't publish this interview until tomorrow at
Okay.
8
Got
8
it.
a.m.
Okay.
But anyway, so you heard it first here. The hard fork is going to happen in the second week of September. And that means Cardano's ready to go for people to start building their businesses, building their applications. And I would really love to see some of the most successful entrepreneurs in the cryptocurrency space coming from Japan.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a lot of fun and really cool, especially on Cardano, because this is where we came from. So it's a call to action, an invitation, and a profound thank you.
Wow, that was a beautiful closing remarks. Thank you so much for your time today. And again, like I mean, super grateful for this opportunity. And you're always welcome to come to the show to speak directly to the community. And so please keep in touch.
Oh, absolutely. I'll see you in Japan one of these days. I was actually going to go, but obviously the COVID slowed things down a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think later this year or next year, I definitely will come back. I used to go to Japan about 3 to 4 times a year.
Oh,
It
wow.
was always a stopover when I went into Asia. We do a lot of business in Mongolia and other places, and so
Mm.
usually I'd stop in Tokyo or stop in Osaka for a few days, and then head further west. So
Mhm.
I'll be back, and next time I'll see you in person.
Yeah, perfect. I'm looking forward to it. So thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Cheers.
you. Cheers. Bye.